what if the hardest parts of your life,
Mm-hmm.
the conflicts, the misunderstandings, the outright opposition you might face at work or maybe in your family, what if those aren't actually interruptions to your life's mission?
Wow. Yeah.
What if those very obstacles are the exact environment where that mission is actually supposed to happen?
I mean, that is a deeply uncomfortable thought, isn't it?
Right. Very.
We are so profoundly conditioned to see resistance as this glaring red flag. Like it's a sign that something has just gone terribly wrong.
Yeah.
Because the general operating system for most of us is a kind of hidden karma, the idea that if I do the right thing, if my motives are pure, then the universe or God or society will reward me with smooth sailing.
Exactly. We subconsciously expect this transactional reality.
Right.
Like, I put in goodness, I get out comfort. But when you hit a wall, when you try to live with integrity and suddenly you're marginalized, where you speak the truth, and you get labeled as the enemy, the immediate instinct is just to panic.
Oh, absolutely.
You think, wait, I followed the rules. Why am I being punished?
Which is entirely natural psychologically speaking. I mean, we crave equilibrium.
Sure.
But when we look at the overarching architecture of the Christian faith, that transactional expectation completely shatters.
It really does.
And what replaces it is something infinitely more demanding, but also infinitely more meaningful.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We're looking at this staggering stack of materials today for you. It's a highly detailed theological manuscript alongside a series of just beautifully complex infographics.
They are stunning.
Right. All brought together by Chris R. Velasquez. And the entire collection is anchored to this single, relentless theme, which is suffering and witness. The church endures opposition.
It really is a dense, incredibly rich collection of work.
For sure.
But what's brilliant about these sources is that they don't just look at isolated moments of historical persecution. They don't just give you a list of martyrs.
Right. It's not just a history textbook.
Exactly. They pull all the way back to the grand narrative of the biblical timeline to prove that this isn't a glitch in the system.
Right. So the mission for our deep dive today, for everyone listening, is to dismantle that quiet assumption that doing the quote-unquote right thing leads to uninterrupted success.
Yes.
We are going to explore this massive paradigm shift. We are moving away from viewing suffering purely as a tragedy, or a failure, or even a sign of divine disapproval.
Which is how we usually see it.
Exactly. Instead, this framework reframes suffering as a profound historical testimony. We're talking about recognizing that the Christian story is not one of triumph without scars, but specifically glory through suffering.
And to really grasp that, we have to completely rethink our vocabulary.
How so?
Well, the word witness, at least in our modern context, usually sounds pretty sterile.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you witness a car crash, or you give a witness statement in court, or, I don't know, in a religious sense, you pass out a flyer or give a polite speech to a friendly crowd.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the first major concept from the sources states really clearly that suffering and witness belong together.
They do.
Like, they are permanently bonded. Why is that?
Because of the environment in which the witness is happening. The church doesn't bear testimony to a world that is already aligned with its message.
Ah, right.
Think about it. If you're standing in a room full of people who already agree with everything you say, testifying is effortless.
Yeah, you just nod along.
Everyone nods, you get a round of applause, you go home.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the church is tasked with testifying to a world that actively resists, mocks, distorts, and often openly persecutes its core message.
So suffering isn't an interruption to the mission. It's the defining environment of it.
Precisely. The gospel advances through people who have learned that Christ is worth confessing, even when it costs them something tangible.
Right.
The witness is authenticated by the pressure.
It's like a ship. I think a lot of people assume that if a ship is hitting rough waves and getting battered by a storm, the ship is failing.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. We think a successful ship is one that sits looking pretty in a completely calm, sunlit harbor.
Yeah, just docked.
Just docked.
Yeah.
But in reality, the ship wasn't built to sit in a harbor. It was engineered specifically to navigate the storm.
Exactly.
The storm isn't stopping the ship's purpose. The storm is the exact environment where the ship proves its design.
What's fascinating here is how sharply that analogy contrasts with our modern expectations.
What do you mean?
Well, so many believers quietly expect their faith to function as a ticket to positions of worldly power, or at least a baseline of societal safety.
Oh, for sure. Comfort.
Right. The thought is, if we can just get enough influence, we can witness from the top down.
The trickle-down effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But if you look at the core theology of the New Testament, there is a very deliberate sequence. The Lamb was slain before he was enthroned.
Wow.
The apostles were opposed before they were heard. The church is explicitly designed to witness from the vulnerability of trusting God, not from the safety of worldly power.
Okay, wait, I need to pause you there because my instinct is to completely reject that idea.
I get that.
It just feels entirely backward. If I have power and influence, I can reach more people, right? I can protect the vulnerable.
But that's the logical human assumption.
So why would this framework argue that vulnerability and suffering are a better platform for truth than safety and power?
Because power operates by coercion, whereas witness operates by conviction.
Oh, that's good.
When you have worldly power, people might listen to you because they have to. They want your favor, or they fear your authority.
We're just complying.
Exactly, it's compliance. But when you are vulnerable, when you are suffering, and yet you still hold on to your integrity and your love for others, people are forced to ask why.
Yeah.
Your testimony isn't backed by a sword. It's backed by a supernatural endurance. It proves you aren't in it for the perks.
That makes total sense. You don't conquer by dominating, you witness by enduring.
Beautifully put.
But to truly grasp the scale of this, we can't just look at our present moment. We have to zoom all the way out.
Way up.
This pattern of suffering and witness isn't just a New Testament invention, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is the shape of redemptive history from the very beginning.
The infographics map this out beautifully. If we follow the biblical arc, we have to start before time even existed, back in eternity.
Right.
Romans 8 and Ephesians 1 point out that before the world began, God didn't merely choose a bunch of isolated individuals for salvation.
Right.
He purposed to form a collective people who would be conformed to the likeness of his Son.
And that likeness isn't just about the final glorious destination. It's about the pathway to get there.
Yes, the pathway to glory inherently includes suffering, because the Son himself was appointed to suffer before entering his exaltation.
Wow.
Anyone united to him is drawn into that exact same trajectory. From an eternal perspective, the hardship you face isn't an accident, it's the method.
Which brings us to the actual beginning of human history, which is creation.
Right.
In Genesis, humanity was made for faithful witness.
Mm-hmm.
We were designed to image God, to steward the world, and to speak truth under his authority.
Perfect conditions.
Exactly. We were made to live in transparent, perfect dependence on God.
And if humanity was originally designed to reflect this truth flawlessly in creation, where exactly did all this friction and hostility come from?
Right. What went wrong?
It forces us to look at the fracture point, the fall. When rebellion enters the human story, it doesn't just produce individual guilt.
It breaks everything.
It produces cosmic relational conflict. The environment shifts from a calm harbor to a violent storm.
Yeah.
This is where truthful representation of God suddenly becomes incredibly costly because the world is now fundamentally bent against him.
But this is where I get hung up.
Okay.
Why does just telling the truth or just living rightly provoke such intense, visceral hostility?
That's a great question.
Think about Cain and Abel early in Genesis. Abel offers a righteous sacrifice, and Cain's response is to literally murder his own brother. Why?
Yeah, it's extreme.
What is it about righteousness that inherently triggers a violent response? Like, why not just ignore the righteous person?
It's a profound psychological dynamic. Truth is resisted by the fallen world, not because the world genuinely believes the truth is a lie, but because truth is morally disruptive.
Morally disruptive.
Yes. The righteous suffer because their very lives are a living, breathing contrast to fallen human rebellion.
Oh, I see. It's like turning on a bright industrial fluorescent light in a filthy hoarder's room.
Oh, that's vivid.
People don't get mad at the light because they think the light is fake. They get furiously angry because the light exposes all the dirt they were trying to hide in the shadows.
That is a perfect analogy.
Okay.
Witness provokes opposition precisely because it tells the truth about the room.
Right.
It exposes the reality of God, the reality of sin, and the need for mercy. An unrighteous life feels condemned simply by being in the presence of a righteous one, even if the righteous person hasn't said a single judgmental word.
Just by existing.
Exactly. From the fall onward, the righteous are often perceived as a rebuke simply by existing.
That dynamic totally sets the stage for the rest of the Old Testament. The sources describe the covenant people of God as the faithful remnant under pressure.
Yeah, that's the phrase.
And it is wild when you actually pause and look at the stories of these Old Testament figures. It's not a highlight reel of easy victories.
Not all.
It is a constant grinding string of hostility against people who are just trying to do the right thing.
The pattern is undeniable once you see it. Think about Noah. We often picture Noah as this triumphant guy on a boat with some giraffes.
Right, the cute nursery rhyme version.
Exactly. But practically speaking, imagine the psychological toll of building a massive vessel on dry land for decades while your entire civilization mocks you as a lunatic.
It had to be exhausting.
His obedience made him a pariah, or Abraham, who is given this grand promise of land and descendants, but has to live his entire life as a nomad,
A wanderer.
a sojourner, a stranger in a land he never actually gets to own.
And we absolutely have to talk about Joseph. I mean, talk about doing the right thing and getting punished for it.
Oh, Joseph is the classic example.
He refuses to compromise his integrity. He literally runs away from Potiphar's wife to avoid sleeping with her. And what's his reward?
Prison.
He gets falsely accused of assault and thrown into an Egyptian dungeon.
Which is a brilliant example of the mechanism of suffering refining a witness. Joseph isn't just waiting in that prison. He is being hollowed out and prepared for a level of authority he couldn't have handled as a boastful teenager.
Wow. Yeah.
But while he is in the dungeon, it just looks like total defeat.
Totally.
The same goes for Daniel in Babylon.
Right. Daniel is a high-ranking official doing an excellent job for the empire.
He's practically running the place.
Yeah. But his mere habit of opening his window and praying to his God 3 times a day is perceived as such a massive socio-political threat to the state religion that they literally manipulate the law to have him thrown into a den of lions.
It's absurd when you think about it. And Jeremiah.
Oh, man. Jeremiah.
He is tasked with telling his own people that their city is going to fall because of their corruption. His reward for telling them the truth to save their souls.
It's so bleak.
They beat him, put him in the stocks, and eventually lower him by ropes into a literal freezing mud cistern to starve to death.
Just terrible.
There is a profound irony here. These covenant witnesses are almost always opposed by the exact people they are sent to serve.
The Psalms are basically the soundtrack to this entire experience. The infographics reference Psalms 22, 27, and 34.
Some of the heaviest ones.
All these raw, agonizing songs where the righteous person is surrounded by enemies, being slandered by false witnesses, feeling completely abandoned, but still desperately crying out to God to sustain them.
But as intense and emotionally exhausting as all these Old Testament stories are, they are ultimately just shadows.
Right.
They are foreshadowing something much larger. They are all pointing toward the absolute centerpiece of the biblical narrative, where this pattern of suffering and vindication reaches its ultimate peak.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources call the cross the shape of witness.
Yes.
Jesus doesn't just show up and give a philosophical lecture on the problem of pain. He steps into human history and completely embodies the pattern we just traced through Noah, Joseph, Daniel, and Jeremiah.
He is the ultimate fulfillment of the suffering servant in Isaiah 53. He is rejected by his own people.
Yeah.
He is opposed by the religious elites who should have recognized him.
Mm-hmm.
He is betrayed by one of his closest friends.
Sold out for silver.
Exactly. He is mocked by the political rulers, tortured and executed as a criminal. He embodies the righteous sufferer perfectly. The light entered the filthy room, and the room violently tried to extinguish it.
There is a striking visual in the infographics that perfectly captures this tension. It's titled The Paradox of the Gospel.
That graphic is brilliant.
If you're listening, imagine a circle split right down the middle with a cross in the center. On the left side, it says, the cross looks like defeat. And it lists what you would observe empirically: mocked, rejected, suffering, death. If you were standing there on Good Friday watching this happen, that is all you would see. Total failure. The end of the movement.
But then the infographic moves to the right side of the circle, representing Easter Sunday and beyond. It says, but it is the path to victory.
Yes.
And it lists the unseen eternal reality of what was actually being accomplished through that very suffering, redeemed, vindicated, raised, reigning.
Wow.
What looked like the ultimate defeat of the witness was actually the ultimate victory.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for the listener here. Are we supposed to glorify pain?
Oh.
Like, should I be actively seeking out suffering in my own life? Because I think the suffering itself is what makes me holy or what saves me.
This raises an important question, and it is crucial to clarify the theological mechanics here. The answer is a strict categorical no.
Okay.
The framework is incredibly clear. Only Christ's suffering atones. Christian suffering is not redemptive in itself. It doesn't save anyone. We do not glorify pain. We glorify Christ in pain.
Wait, you use the word atones. What does that actually look like mechanically? Why is his suffering different than ours?
Think of atonement like a cosmic balancing of the scales. Humanity accrued a massive, infinite moral debt through its rebellion,
Right.
a fracture in justice that we were completely bankrupt to pay. Christ's suffering and death act as the payment for that debt. He absorbs the righteous judgment of God on behalf of humanity.
Okay.
That is a one-time, completely unique, universe-altering event. Our suffering doesn't pay off any cosmic debt. It doesn't balance the scales.
So what is the meaning of our suffering then? If it doesn't save us or anyone else, why does it matter?
It matters because of a mechanism called union with Christ.
Union with Christ, okay.
This is the idea that believers don't just externally imitate Jesus, like copying a mentor's daily routine.
Like reading a self-help book.
Right. It's not just behavioral mimicry. They're actually spiritually fused to his life. We share in his life. And because we share his life, we naturally share in his historical trajectory. If the head of the body, meaning Christ, suffered humiliation before entering glory, then the rest of the body, meaning the church, will inherently experience that exact same pathway.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's fellowship. We are walking the same road he walked, empowered by the same Spirit.
So it's not about seeking pain. It's about realizing that if you are genuinely attached to Christ, you are going to encounter the same friction he encountered.
Exactly.
And that perfectly explains what happens next in the timeline. Jesus ascends, he leaves, and the church age officially begins. But the kingdom doesn't just arrive in full force and instantly fix every societal problem.
No, it arrives in conflict. Jesus announces the kingdom of God, but he uses fascinating parables to describe how it operates.
Yeah, the agricultural ones.
Right. He says the kingdom is like wheat growing right alongside weeds, or it's like a tiny bit of yeast hidden inside a massive lump of dough.
It's subtle.
It is real, it is growing, it is fundamentally altering everything it touches, but it is subversive. It is not always obvious to worldly eyes, and it exists in the middle of hostile territory.
And the values of this kingdom completely clash with the world's values. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says something that sounds like absolute madness to the modern ear.
Oh, completely backward.
He says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake."
Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you. It's a staggering statement.
Who wants that?
Right. But if we understand the paradigm we've been discussing, it makes perfect sense. Kingdom people should expect conflict precisely because kingdom righteousness confronts the self-centered, power-hungry values of the present age.
This introduces a really helpful concept from the sources, the idea of exile. In Peter's first letter, he calls believers sojourners and exiles.
Yes.
We are strangers in a hostile world. Why? Because the church's allegiance is eschatological.
Let's break that word down.
Please do.
Eschatological essentially means looking toward the ultimate end of things, the final destination of human history.
Okay.
The church ultimately belongs to another king and another city, a future reality that hasn't fully arrived yet. Because our primary citizenship is in a kingdom the world doesn't recognize or value, we are essentially living as exiles in our own neighborhoods. We play by a different set of rules.
Which naturally creates tension.
Exactly. And exile is the condition where witness becomes both the hardest and the most fiercely necessary.
Let's look at how this played out historically in the book of Acts. The Holy Spirit arrives at Pentecost. Wind, fire, thousands of people believing.
A massive revival.
Yeah, you would think, okay, the Spirit of God is here. We have supernatural power. All the conflict should just melt away now.
You'd think so.
Okay.
But the arrival of the Spirit does not remove conflict. It actually intensifies the witness, which immediately provokes a more intense opposition.
Because the light gets brighter.
Right. The religious authorities who crucified Jesus turn their attention to his followers. The apostles are threatened, they are beaten, they are thrown into prison.
And then there is that pivotal, brutal moment with Stephen, the first Christian martyr.
Yes, chapter 7.
He gives this brilliant defense of the faith, and the crowd gets so enraged, they drag him out and stone him to death.
It's horrifying.
If you're a PR manager for the early church, you are looking at Stephen's death as an unmitigated disaster. The movement is failing.
But the biblical narrative doesn't frame Stephen's martyrdom as a tragedy where God lost control. It shows that God uses that exact moment of intense persecution as the catalyst to explode the gospel out beyond the borders of Jerusalem.
Wow.
The believers are forced to scatter to survive, and everywhere they run, they take the message with them. The opposition acted like wind hitting a dandelion. It just blew the seas across the entire known world.
The Apostle Paul is basically the ultimate case study for this dynamic. Paul's entire ministry reads like an endurance test.
Oh, absolutely.
Shipwrecks, beatings, starvation, riots, betrayal by fake friends, constant imprisonment. But Paul doesn't view himself as a victim.
Yeah.
He interprets all of it through this exact lens of witness. There is a defining quote from 2 Corinthians 4:10 that captures this. He says, "We always carry in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies."
That is arguably the clearest, most profound statement of suffering as witness in all of Scripture.
It's heavy.
It is. The physical and emotional dying of Jesus, the exhaustion, the rejection, the physical toll, is visibly carried by believers under pressure,
Why, though?
so that the indestructible resurrection life of Jesus can be put on display for the world to see. When people see a believer shattered by circumstances but still radiating hope and love, they are seeing the life of Christ.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening to this right now?
That's the big question.
We've talked a lot about high-level theology, cosmic scales, ancient history, and the Apostle Paul enduring shipwrecks. But how does a listener practically walk this path of witness in their everyday life in the 21st century?
The infographics do a fantastic job of translating this massive theology into daily reality.
Let's hear it.
They map out the life cycle of a believer in 6 phases. It starts with we are called to follow and testify to the truth. Next, we are commissioned, sent out into our specific spheres of influence with good news. Then, inevitably, we are confronted.
Confronted.
This is where the friction happens.
And that confrontation doesn't have to mean you're being thrown into a literal lion's den.
Yeah.
It can happen in the mundane spaces of your life.
Yeah.
It's the subtle marginalization at your workplace because you won't fudge the numbers.
Yeah.
It's the mocking you endure at school. It's the deep, heartbreaking spiritual resistance you face in your own family when you try to establish healthy, righteous boundaries.
Exactly. When that confrontation hits, the next phase is sustained. You realize you can't endure it on your own grit, so the Spirit gives you strength, courage, and patience in the midst of that pressure.
You're not alone in it.
Right. That leads to becoming steadfast. You persevere over the long haul without losing your love or your hope. And finally, victorious. God is glorified, and His kingdom advances through your endurance.
The sources also break down the specific mechanisms of how suffering practically serves our witness. They list 5 distinct outcomes, and I want us to really take our time with these because this is where the rubber meets the road. First, suffering endures strength.
Right. Think of it like physical exercise. A muscle only grows when resistance is applied to it.
You have to lift heavy.
Exactly. The micro tears from lifting heavy weights are what force the muscle to rebuild stronger. In the same way, spiritual stamina is only built when your faith is tested against heavy resistance.
The second outcome is that suffering refines character. And this is huge.
Oh, it's massive.
The idea is that suffering strips away pretense. It forces you to look in the mirror and ask, am I doing this for social approval or am I actually doing this for Christ?
Let's ground that in a modern example.
Let's do it.
Imagine you have a lucrative career, but your company asks you to participate in something deeply unethical. You refuse, and as a result, you are fired.
Wow. Okay.
You lose your income, your status, maybe some of your professional friends. In that moment of intense pressure, your character is placed in a crucible. It burns away the idol of financial security.
It really tests you.
It exposes whether your ultimate trust was in your paycheck or in your God. The suffering refines your character down to its absolute purest essence.
The third outcome is that suffering authenticates the message to the outside world. This is the psychological weight of having skin in the game.
Right.
If you are willing to lose your job, your social standing, or even your life for a message, a skeptical world has to at least acknowledge that you genuinely believe what you are saying. It proves you aren't just selling a product for personal gain.
Fourth, suffering often opens doors for the gospel in places it might never have reached otherwise.
Give me an example of that.
Think of Paul. He is arrested and thrown into a Roman dungeon. On paper, his ministry is over.
Yeah, he's stuck.
But because he is chained to elite Roman guards 24 hours a day, those guards are forced to listen to him.
That's amazing.
The gospel infiltrates the highest levels of the Roman military and government, a space Paul never could have walked into as a free man.
Because he was a prisoner.
Right. Your hardship might put you in a hospital room or a courtroom or a difficult neighborhood, specifically so you can be a witness in a place that desperately needs light.
And the fifth outcome is that it produces an eternal reward. The endurance isn't forgotten. It is recognized and honored in the age to come. Speaking directly to you, the listener, for a second.
Yes, listen to this.
If you're in the middle of it right now, well, if you are facing isolation or hostility simply because you refuse to compromise your integrity, this framework is telling you that your response in those moments, your quiet kindness, your patience, your refusal to retaliate, your truthful speech under that specific pressure is a profoundly powerful, costly witness. It is never, ever meaningless.
And that individual quiet witness has a massive ripple effect over time.
How does it spread?
The infographics show a progression of how this gospel witness transforms the world outward. It starts small with the individual. A single heart is changed. Sins are forgiven.
Okay.
But that transformed individual goes home, which transforms the good bat. Family relationships are healed. Cycles of abuse are broken. Homes are built on love instead of dominance.
And strong families impact the community. Justice, mercy, and peace begin to shape neighborhoods because the people living in them actually care about their
It
neighbors.
scales up.
That eventually shifts the culture, the arts, the education systems, the way businesses operate, begin to reflect God's values of human dignity. And ultimately, it reaches the nation's people from every background drawn to this completely countercultural way of living.
It's an incredibly inspiring vision.
It really is.
But the materials are also deeply pragmatic. They recognize that human beings are flawed. Navigating this path of witness is basically a psychological and spiritual minefield.
Oh, for sure.
If you don't understand the environment you are in, you can easily cause more damage than good. The sources explicitly warn about several dangerous traps that believers frequently fall into when the pressure gets turned up.
Yes, there is a whole section dedicated to common dangers, and we need to deconstruct these because misunderstanding your suffering can be just as damaging as the suffering itself.
Absolutely.
The first danger is equating suffering with failure.
This is the Job's friends mentality.
Oh, explain that.
If you are suffering, you must have committed some secret sin. You must have made a mistake. But as we've discussed for the last half hour, suffering is often the direct result of obedience, not disobedience.
Right.
If you are facing pushback, it doesn't automatically mean you took a wrong turn. You might be standing exactly where you were supposed to be.
The second danger is seeking suffering for its own sake. It's developing a martyr complex.
Exactly. The church does not pursue pain. It seeks faithfulness. You don't go out looking for a fight just so you can feel persecuted and holy.
Yeah, we aren't looking for spiritual trophies here.
You just try to live a quiet, faithful, loving life, and you let the friction come to you naturally. Suffering is a consequence of witness, not the goal.
The third trap is losing the gospel under pressure. It's cowardice. The fear of being canceled or mocked or excluded can easily make believers soften, dilute, or hide the truth to avoid conflict.
But if we dilute the message to make it palatable to the room, our witness loses its entire substance.
It's useless then.
We become the salt that has lost its flavor. Christ must still be proclaimed clearly, even if our voice shakes while we do it.
The fourth one is a huge one in our current cultural climate, responding to hostility with bitterness.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the church must not mirror the world's hostility.
But we see that all the time.
This happens all the time. The world attacks believers with mockery, political power, or anger, and the believers attack right back with the exact same venom.
Eye for an eye.
They form tribal factions and try to crush their enemies. When we do that, we completely lose our witness. We are called to fight with love, patience, and prayer even, and especially toward our opponents.
Danger number 5 is using suffering as a badge of superiority. Taking pride in your persecution. Just because you are experiencing pushback doesn't automatically make you perfectly sanctified or better than the person next to you.
So true.
The issue isn't just that you suffer. The issue is how you suffer. Are you suffering with humility or arrogance?
And the final, perhaps most important danger to avoid forgetting the resurrection. Christian suffering must always be interpreted through the lens of Easter Sunday.
Without that, what is it?
Without the resurrection, suffering is just a depressing, meaningless tragedy. It's just pain. But with the resurrection, suffering becomes a temporary testimony on the way to ultimate vindication.
So how do we actually avoid these traps?
Yeah.
How do you endure a hostile workplace or a broken family dynamic without becoming bitter, prideful, or fearful?
The sources provide a very practical how to endure section. First, remain rooted in Scripture. You need an anchor of truth outside of your current circumstances to remind you of reality when the storm hits.
You need a baseline.
Second, pray with absolute dependence, And there is a fascinating nuance here. We should be asking God for the boldness to witness, not just praying for the pressure to stop.
That reminds me of the apostles in Acts 4. They are actively being threatened by the authorities, and they hold a prayer meeting.
Right.
But they don't pray, Lord, please make these authorities leave us alone and give us an easy life.
Yeah.
They pray, Lord, look upon their threats and grant your servants to continue to speak your word with all boldness.
It's amazing.
They prayed for courage inside the fire, not an escape hatch out of it.
It's a completely different posture. Third, stay in community. You are not designed to endure exile alone. The body of Christ is meant to carry each other's burdens. When you are too weak to stand, the community stands for you.
That is so vital.
And fourth, keep your eyes relentlessly on Christ. He is the author and perfecter of the faith. He walked the path first.
But ultimately, all of this endurance, all of this suffering, all of this refusal to retaliate, it would be psychologically impossible to sustain if we didn't know how the story actually ends.
Which brings us to the final act of this grand biblical narrative. We've moved through eternity, creation, the fall, the covenant, redemption, the kingdom, and the church age. Now we reach the climax.
The sources outline a phase called restoration. And it's important to know what that means. Restoration doesn't always mean God drops a rope and pulls you out of the furnace immediately.
No, it doesn't.
Often it means he sustains and preserves your faith within the furnace so that you don't break.
Right. But there is a definitive end to the furnace. The next phase is judgment. And we have to talk about this carefully because judgment can sound harsh.
Yeah, it's a heavy word.
But the text addresses a very real, deep human desire for justice. When you are being opposed, oppressed, or abused, you want things made right. The scale of the universe demands it. The author points to Revelation 6, where the souls of the martyrs are crying out before God's throne, asking, "How long until you judge the earth and avenge our blood?"
It's a cry for justice. And the profoundly comforting point here is that the persecuted church does not need to avenge itself because divine justice is guaranteed.
It is handled.
You don't have to become bitter or violent toward your enemies because God will eventually answer history's violence. The world's opposition is very real and it causes immense pain, but it is not ultimate. It has a hard expiration date.
Which leads to the final destination, new creation and eternity. The text cites Revelation 21, the beautiful promise where God comes down to dwell with his people, and he will personally wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death, mourning, crying, and pain will completely pass away.
And it's important to clarify how the framework views this. Eternity isn't just an endless endurance test where we bravely suffer forever in some stoic state. Eternity is the final, absolute abolition of all that opposes life with God.
Yes.
The storm is over. The ship is finally in the harbor it was designed to reach.
The sources phrase this beautifully. In the new creation, suffering ends and witness becomes worship. The redeemed dwell forever in the presence of God, where testimony has become sight.
Wow.
You don't have to witness to the truth anymore because the truth is standing right in front of everyone. The opposition was temporary. God's kingdom is eternal.
What an absolutely massive journey we've just taken you on today. We started by looking at an eternal purpose. A plan formed before time even existed to shape a people through the exact same path of suffering and glory that Christ walked.
From the very beginning.
We traced that through the moral disruption of a fallen world, watched it play out in the lives of Old Testament exiles, and saw it anchored completely in a king who was crucified at apparent defeat and then rose again in absolute victory.
A total paradigm shift.
We saw how you are sustained in the messy middle of this age by the Holy Spirit, enduring as exiles, all while heading toward a guaranteed, tearless eternity where divine justice is finally served.
The ultimate assurance that carries us through all of this is that our suffering is not the end of our story. Witnesses. We endure the pressure. We testify to the truth in the dark room. We await the return of the King.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day, building on everything we've just unpacked.
Yeah.
We talked about how God doesn't always pull us out of the fire often. He preserves us within it.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, well, what if the ultimate victory of our witness isn't surviving the furnace at all? What if the true victory is living with such undeniable hope, such quiet confidence, and such radical love while you're inside the fire that the very people who threw you in actually want to join you there simply because they can so clearly see that Christ is in the fire with you?
That is profound.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Stay insanely curious, keep asking the hard questions, and keep unpacking the world around you. We'll catch you on the next one.